Discussion. So our final guest speaker is Chris Galloway, Massey University Senior Lecturer and Program Leader for the new Master of Professional Public Relations. Look, here he is. It starts in August. You can see he's keen. Before life as an academic, Chris was a journalist and a political lobbyist, and he's a regular commentator on all things Middle Eastern, including ISIS and its use of media. Please welcome Dr. Chris Galloway.
Thanks very much. I'm going to talk to you about after the crisis, and clearly after a crisis sometimes the aroma is not very nice, too much brown stuff flying around. Organisational crises, and that's one thing we will be talking about a lot in our new professional PR master's degree, are a little like spilt milk. Most people simply want to swish away the spill and move on, but I want to suggest to you that that could be a pretty costly mistake. Handling the crisis after the crisis successfully can be even more important than managing your immediate crisis response. One key reason for that is that crises often reveal policy and procedural missteps that staff have allowed to happen, sometimes over a lengthy period. And by the way, I'm mentioning staff, but research shows that at least 53% of crises are caused by managers, which is something I delight in telling management students. She'll be right is, of course, still a Kiwi mantra, but the deviations do need to be brought back on track, and that can take time. And there is another reason why thinking about after the crisis is important, and that's because, as a rule of thumb, all crises, no matter how well handled, do some reputation damage, even if only short-term. Reputation repair takes time, and it's no light matter because studies, of course, show that reputation influences purchase decisions. You may have seen the research that Microsoft Canada put out last year, and about which I've been talking to some groups lately, suggesting that now human attention spans are about 8 seconds long. That's supposedly a little less than the 9 seconds a goldfish is allegedly capable of doing. So in that kind of world, stakeholders are likely to make snap judgments and give short shrift to lengthy and intellectually demanding explanations. The more observant of you might have noticed that there is a head of Darth Vader here. There's no truth in the suggestion that this was based on an earlier plaster cast of my face. We were talking about reputation and attention spans, and I won't take more time on that except to say a little bit more about reputation in the post-crisis sense. A good prior reputation, research does show, can exert some kind of shielding effect when the crisis strikes. Customers are more likely to give you the benefit of the doubt and to think that a nasty event was a one-off rather than evidence of a systemic problem. There is this idea around of reputation capital, that if you are seen to do good long enough by the right people, that you can build up a sort of a goodwill bank. But I suggest to you that that idea should be put away in a back closet. Reputation is so dynamic that you can't safely assume that today's positive stakeholder evaluation will last. There's another point, and it's a pretty crucial one, I think. Your company's crisis management will be judged not only on how the short-term crisis response was handled, but also on how the post-crisis period was addressed. We've all heard about the massive oil spill that BP experienced in 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico. What many people don't know is that after the spill, the US Environmental Protection Agency decided that BP wasn't showing, and pardon the deliberate pun here, enough energy in dealing with the post-spill events. They got BP temporarily banned from bidding for new federal contracts, and their right to bid was only restored a little bit later on. So there was a huge opportunity cost, something that's not often factored into considerations of crisis management and the damage to reputations that can result. The EPA actually said that BP lacked business integrity. BP later sued the US government over the ban and said it faced irreparable harm, quote unquote, if the constraint wasn't lifted. And so they did a deal to allow the company to compete again for contracts, and as part of the deal, that lawsuit was dropped. Now, a New Zealand example is one that, again, we'll all have heard of, is the 2013 false botulism scare that was prompted by Fonterra's announcement that some whey protein could be contaminated by the bacterium. Tim, I'm sure you well recall that the initial announcement was released in the early hours of a Saturday morning, not exactly prime news time. The announcement, of course, triggered a global response, including from Russia, which had not imported any of the suspect product. But the initial post-event response created confusion and some pretty trenchant criticism, especially when it was revealed that the potential product pollution had been the focus of extended debate within Fonterra. And timely disclosure became an issue. It attracted a lot of comment from the Prime Minister and many others. And the reputation of the whole key industry sector, not just that of one very important company, was placed in question. Overseas media expressed doubts in no very uncertain terms about whether New Zealand's 100% pure branding matched the facts. In fact, the Daily Mail Online had the memorable heading of 100% manure, ? So this kind of reputation spill from an initial protagonist to others not directly involved is a risk every time there is a significant crisis. So what do you do beyond cleaning up the spilt milk initially? There's a guy called William Benoit who came up with a set of what he called image restoration strategies, and this is something that we teach people here. These strategies you will see in use by crisis managers who may never have read what Benoit has to say. Now, I've been asked which of these strategies that I'm about to talk to you about is the best. Well, there's no one-size-fits-all evaluation of which one works best. That's going to depend on the situation, both inside and outside the organisation. It'll also be governed by the way that the organisational leadership views what's happened in their own responsibilities. He came up with 5 broad categories. The first is a simple denial, or shifting the blame to someone else. It wasn't us, the supplier let us down badly type of response. And then he talked about blame shifting or evading responsibility. He reckoned that this strategy has 4 components. The first is called provocation. And that's kind of a corporate version of the devil made me do it, claiming that the offensive action was in response to someone else's wrong action. And the second is to suggest that you either didn't have the knowledge you needed to be able to act or the freedom of movement to be able to do so. That's the I couldn't do a thing because the boss told me not to touch it justification. There's also the assertion that it was all an accident or we were trying to do the right thing. That we were trying to do the right thing tends not to work terribly well. The other categories are things like reducing offensiveness, which in practice can include attacking one's accusers or paying compensation, taking corrective action, or what Benoit calls mortification. And that would have been appropriate, was appropriate in the end in the Mercury Energy case that you mentioned, Tim. This is where, and that kind of echoes of penance here, you humbly admit responsibility and ask for forgiveness. You're not justifying, you're saying it's down to us and we'll make it right. Now, Kiwi managers might not like the idea of such an ego-denying response, but this framework that Benoit came up with is simply a structured way of looking at what organisational leaders do in practice. And I think it underscores, I would want to persuade you that it underscores the need to strategise image recovery or reputation recovery every bit as much as physical, infrastructural rebuilding and the much talked about resilience. Of course, many public relations advisors position themselves to offer this kind of strategy development. And of course, usually, often, that's pretty valuable input. But you may not need it if you invest time in thinking hard about what to do once the spilt milk is mopped up.
Thank you, Chris. So let's take a few minutes to set the stage up and we'll see you in a moment. For now, though, please thank all our initial speakers. Thank you.